If your spouse has died or is getting ready to die here in Florida, or you're doing estate planning and you're married, I want you to look real carefully at this video, because this concept of elective share and the rights of a surviving spouse when you die is super important. And I want to explain it with an example that I have from not so long ago. So a woman calls in, husband was dying, and she knew that he had provided for her fairly well. She was more or less satisfied with what was happening. She said that, she didn't think she needed an attorney because everything was going to be fine in the family. The kind of stuff that you read about, she says, is not going to happen here. The stepkids had been wonderful for her because she had taken care of their dad, who was sick, and it was already quite a handful. So when he came down here and she was taking care of him, they were great. Holidays, the grandkids, all that sort of thing. So, but there was obviously something in her spidey sense that was telling her that maybe that perfect little picture of Norman Rockwell wasn't exactly accurate. So she'd called back a couple times since then, and I'm always happy to chat with people because that's where relationships are built as an attorney. But months later, I get a more sort of emphatic phone call out of her, and she just said, I really am getting a sense here that I want you to look over this stuff. So in fact, I did. I started going through the paperwork, and it alerted me to a topic that's going to become more and more important and significant for everyone in this estate pool. And I always define it this way. You got the donor class, which is the people that's dying. You got the professional class. Those are the fiduciaries, the attorney, the financial advisor, the accountant. And then you got what I call the beneficiary class over here. They're like the little ducklings, the little chicks with their mouths open trying to figure out how that estate's going to them. And the most important part in this beneficiary class, or the most important party in that beneficiary class, is the surviving spouse. Let me give you the theory behind why surviving spouse is so important. And it goes back to, hundreds of years ago in Florida, and frankly in this country. We did not want to see a mother, particularly minor children, just get kicked out in the cold. So dad's off there working, drinking, partying, gambling away money, and he goes and off and unlives himself, and all of a sudden you got a widow that's homeless. All of a sudden you got kids that are homeless. So we wrote into Florida's Constitution and then Florida's statute these protections for surviving spouse and for minor children. And the primary protections, one that's right in the Constitution, which is the most important protection, is homestead. When you die, when a spouse dies, surviving spouse has very important rights to stay in that house. The second one that comes along much later is elective share. And not only does a spouse get a right to live in the house, elective share says you get 30% of the elective estate in order to make sure that you can survive, pay bills, do whatever. So critical part is understanding what is that elective estate, and that's where this is really important for this professional class. I got to tell you that one of the huge areas of liability is these quasi-professionals, the financial planner, the CPA, even the probate practitioner that hadn't done a bunch of this litigation, that goes and does a simple will, simple trust, is telling the testator everything's fine, charges a couple $100 for it, but then doesn't really understand the full picture of homestead and elective share. And that's where this trouble blows up, right? And I say this, that if you are doing estate planning, putting these documents together, and you're doing it in a way that you're trying to avoid elective share, or you're trying to cut out the surviving spouse, you got special privileges coming for you, and that special privileges are not in a good way. That's a judge saying you got some problems. That's an attorney on the other side saying all you people over here have some problems, because if you're trying to do estate planning in a way that avoids and interferes with the constitutional rights, the statutory rights, particularly of minors and certainly of spouses, you got some problems, and we can be talking about that real formally in terms of court. But the bottom line is this. 2023 comes along, in the state of Florida increases the protections in elective share. We talk about elective share. It's 30% of the augmented estate now. And again, that's really technical and it's really important. But the bottom line is this. And again, this is where I've seen it blow up for people. Um, when this professional class over here is trying to play games with the estate, trying to take assets and push it over here and trying to take assets and push it over there in a way to reduce down what that spouse is entitled to or what that minor child is entitled to, that opens everyone up for a whole lot of liability on that professional side and then expands the potential for the people on the donor side. Something in my eye there. But the bottom line is this. When this comes along, when the question of surviving spouse comes along, it's really important that this be carefully analyzed. What is the estate that we're dealing with? And I can tell you something. If I'm representing a surviving spouse and I find out that the kids or whatever have really tried to help out with deferring or declining what is that wife's share, we're going to be talking about disgorging or pulling some money out of that side of it to equalize and make it more fair to this surviving spouse. I want to be really clear and blunt about this. You do not play games with interfering with the surviving spouse's rights. You do not play games with interfering with the rights, particularly of minor children. And in one particular case I could think about, it was the other adult children that were helping with this estate planning over here and engaging in actions of trying to hide assets, give away assets, and what have you in this estate planning to the detriment of the surviving spouse and the minor children, while at the same time, glad handing and kind of trying to hide the ball for this surviving spouse. One other huge point, which is going to be the subject of a whole other video that I'm going to do here in a minute, and that is the role of the attorney for the estate, the attorney for the personal representative. That attorney does not represent all these other chicks down here with their mouths open trying to figure out what we're going to get. That attorney does not represent that surviving spouse. In the vast majority of circumstances, everything's on the up and up, and the attorney for the personal representative is fulfilling fiduciary duties and making sure everything's straight and clear, but that is not always the case. And when you get that paper in the mail from the attorney for the personal representative, you're the surviving spouse, you're the kids over here, and they want you just to sign this thing, waiver of accounting and this other documents, that's a clue. Wait a minute. I need to think about this. Do I want to sign this and give everything away, potentially give my rights away? That's something you really need to think about. Now, deadline, super, super important. You're the surviving spouse, your kids or whatever. You need to think about 6-month deadline, 90-day deadlines, other things that if you do not file on time, poof, your rights are gone forever. That case I resolved with the surviving spouse resulted in a net increase to her of a significant amount of money, life-changing money, because under the will that she was working with, under what she thought she was entitled to, she was here. The law, the Constitution, the statutes provided that she was here. Had she not called me, had she let that timeline roll by, she would have stayed down here for the rest of her life. The rules and the statutes that deal with all of this are all on floridarules.net. That's the starting point. Getting to the details on how those actually function and operate is much more complex. But if you like and subscribe here, I'll push over a video for you in a packet that will explain all this in a really easy to understand way that will make it very helpful and I think useful to you.